All right, mates, it is mid-November 2025, and the conversation around AI has officially grown up. The hype has cooled, the skepticism has been loud, and now the real question is simple. Is AI actually paying off? 2 Ivy League studies dropped this year and gave us the clearest snapshot yet of where things stand. One claimed 95% of AI projects are failing. The other proved most companies are seeing solid ROI. But before we dig in, did you know 40% of you aren't following us? Come on, mates. Hit that follow button and collect our episodes on pods.media. Your support means the world. Thanks.
Absolutely. And today, our focus is really laser sharp. It's all about measurable performance. For most of this year, the headlines have just been swamped with this fear narrative.
Yeah, the whole AI is just a money pit idea.
Exactly. So our mission here is pretty simple. Cut through all that noise, look at the actual verifiable data. We're going to contrast that headline-grabbing skepticism.
That 95% fail rate thing.
Right, that one. We'll contrast it with what's really the gold standard now for enterprise AI tracking, the Wharton GBK report. They've been tracking this stuff for 3 years straight.
3 years is a long time in AI.
It really is. We are definitely past the cool demo stage now. So we're here to give you a clear, unbiased view of AI's actual measurable performance now that it's really moved into core business workflows.
Okay, let's unpack that clash then. Because that narrative of failure, it's been really persistent. That 95% fail rate study from MIT, it went totally viral.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone was talking about it.
It seemed to confirm every skeptic's, deepest fear that AI was just this expensive flop that only looked good in, PowerPoint slides.
Mm-hmm.
But when you actually drill down into that source, it feels incredibly thin, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. I mean, it grabbed attention, no doubt. Every boardroom probably discussed it because it kind of validated that negative gut feeling some people had.
Right.
But the rigor it wasn't really there. You mentioned it based on just 52 executives. That's a tiny sample.
Not tiny.
And it leaned really heavily on public statements, stuff that might have been, cherry-picked, or maybe just reflected some short-term problems with pilot projects.
So, great headline, but limited scope, kind of a snapshot in time.
Exactly. A snapshot, not the whole movie, which is why we need to pivot to the counter evidence.
Okay, so if that MIT study was the snapshot, what does the movie look like? You mentioned the Wharton study, the 3rd annual GBK report.
Yeah.
That's tracking the maturation over time.
Right. And what's fascinating here is just the difference in the methodological depth. The Wharton team, they surveyed 800 enterprise leaders.
800. Okay, that's a different league.
Totally different. Across diverse global industries, too. And crucially, they didn't just ask executives what they thought. They actually tracked adoption, integration, and most importantly, ROI.
For 3 years running.
3 consecutive years. And that longitudinal view, looking at it over time, that's really the only way you can genuinely measure success when you're deploying new tech like this.
So what's the big takeaway from Wharton? Is AI maturing or failing?
Their finding is pretty clear. AI is maturing, and maturing rapidly. The whole narrative of failure. It's basically being systematically debunked by the hard data showing successful embedding into companies.
And you can see that embedding clearly when you look at the usage metrics, right? These aren't just isolated little experiments tucked away in R&D anymore.
Precisely. We're seeing a complete shift in how integrated this stuff is. We're looking at 82% of enterprise leaders now reporting they use generative AI weekly.
82% weekly.
And here's the real marker of, functional maturity. Daily usage is up to 46%.
Daily. Nearly half.
Yeah, and that's a massive jump, like some 17-point increase in daily usage compared to just the year before.
Okay, so if almost half of top leadership is using this stuff every single day, that tells you it's not just a nice to have anymore.
Not at all. It's becoming fundamental to how they operate, how they get efficient.
Okay, usage is way up. That's clear. But, the real yardstick is always the money, isn't it? Are they just burning budget faster with all this usage, or is the money actually coming back? What does that multi-year data tell us about the cold, hard ROI?
Right, and this is probably the definitive finding, the thing that really closes the book on that broad failure narrative. The number is 74%.
74% of companies.
74% of companies report positive, measurable ROI from their AI investments.
Okay, that's significant.
It is. And what's more, 72% are now formally tracking their GenAI performance. That signals a big shift, AI has gone from being maybe a research expense line item to a measurable, accountable part of the business.
But wait, hang on. If 74% are successful, what about the other 26%? That's still a quarter of the market? Are we just kind of sweeping under the rug those companies that might have invested heavily and seen, well, zero returns? We need a bit of balance here.
That's a really critical question, and it injects the necessary skepticism. You're right. The sources suggest that remaining 26%, they're often the ones suffering from what you might call pilot purgatory.
Pilot purgatory.
Yeah, often large, maybe more bureaucratic organizations. They've made the investment, they bought the tech, but they just seem incapable of actually scaling it across different functions. Maybe it's internal friction, red tape.
So they bought the Ferrari, but basically left it parked in the garage.
That's a perfect analogy, yeah. But the overall trend, the dominant trend, is undeniable. The tech works, and it pays for itself when it's properly implemented and scaled.
And something that jumped out at me in the data, kind of counterintuitive actually, was where the strongest returns were showing up. It wasn't just the mega corporations, the Fortune 100.
No, exactly. And this is such a vital nugget, especially for you listening who might be running a mid-market firm or maybe consulting for one. The study actually found that mid-sized firms, specifically those in the, say, $50 million to $2 billion revenue range, they're seeing the strongest returns.
Really? Why is that? You'd think the giants with the huge budgets would be crushing it.
It seems to come down to what the giants often lack: structural agility.
Okay, explain that. What's the difference in agility mean in practice? Why is mid-market winning the ROI game here?
Well, think about bureaucracy and legacy systems. A massive corporation might spend, 18 months just in committees discussing compliance and implementation pathways before they even roll out a new tool.
Right, I can picture that.
Whereas a mid-sized firm, they can potentially implement a successful GenAI solution in one department, let's say customer service or sales enablement, prove it works, and then scale it company-wide in maybe 6 months.
Much faster cycle time.
Much faster. They're large enough to get real scale efficiencies, but they're nimble enough to avoid getting bogged down in that bureaucratic drag. They can deploy, measure the results, and pivot way faster than the supertankers.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting then. We need to link that ROI back to the day-to-day stuff. If companies are getting these measurable returns, they must be using AI for specific, high-value tasks. What are the proven use cases that are actually generating revenue or, cutting costs right now?
Yeah, the list really centers around automating high-volume knowledge work. Think about the huge time drain involved in just synthesizing information.
Okay.
So the top uses are things like data analysis and summarization. That alone saves countless hours of manual research time. We're also seeing huge gains in accelerating the sales cycle through AI, helping with proposal writing and presentation creation.
Proposal writing. Interesting.
Yeah, and optimizing staffing in areas like customer support and internal IT help desks through automation.
So basically the days of the intern spending 10 hours summarizing market research reports or drafting 30 slightly different versions of some compliance doc, those days are kind of numbered.
Functionally, yes. These are verified productivity gains, and they're now getting properly embedded in the core enterprise toolkit. And this, I think, brings us to the real AI turning point. The debate isn't really about whether to adopt anymore. The data seems to have settled that.
Right.
The question now is purely about competitive execution. How well does your AI perform compared to the competition?
Okay. And while those foundational uses cases, summarization, data analysis, are cementing GenAI's place, enterprises are already looking past them, aren't they? Towards the next frontier. The Force has highlighted this shift from passive tools to more active ones.
Yeah.
AI agents.
Yeah, this is definitely the future direction, and it probably needs a quick clarification for anyone not familiar with the term agent. An AI agent isn't just a more sophisticated chatbot.
Okay.
Current GenAI, like we just discussed, it mostly summarizes text or answers questions. An agent is designed to actually execute multi-step tasks autonomously. Think of it more like a virtual employee that's capable of orchestrating workflows.
Okay, so give me an example. Instead of me asking the AI to summarize a sales call.
Right. An agent could potentially analyze that call recording, extract the key follow-up actions automatically, update your CRM system with the new data points, and then automatically draft and even schedule the follow-up email.
All without human oversight at each step.
Potentially, yes. Or with minimal oversight. It moves from just passive information retrieval to active workflow automation.
That's a big leap.
It is. And the adoption metric here is pretty astounding, actually. It shows how mature the market's thinking is becoming. 58% of enterprises are already testing AI agents.
58%. Already testing.
Already testing them for things like complex workflow automation, running analytics, orchestrating processes. This shows that firms are getting comfortable enough to start moving really critical end-to-end processes towards these autonomous systems. Now, Despite all this optimism, the measurable ROI we've talked about, we do have to transition to the cracks in the system, because the biggest roadblocks that are left, they aren't really technical anymore. The tech basically works.
Okay, so what are they?
They are entirely cultural and organizational. The hardest problems left to solve are, well, almost anthropological. Human problems.
That's a fascinating pivot.
Mm.
Okay, let's detail those human challenges then. You mentioned a skills paradox in the prep. We're seeing data here that looks like a real tension point inside companies. What are the numbers telling us about the human experience?
Yeah, it's like we're caught in this massive internal anxiety loop. On the one hand, you have 89% of leaders agreeing that AI actually enhances employees' skills.
Oh, enhances them.
By requiring people to operate at a higher, more strategic level, automate the grunt work, focus on the complex stuff. That's the good news, the positive spin.
Okay.
But at the same time, you have 43% of employees fearing skill decline. They see AI taking over the mundane tasks they currently do, the things they're maybe comfortable with,
Right.
and they worry their core competence is just going to be made redundant.
The AI will take my job. Fear, but framed as skill loss.
Exactly. And that internal tension alone, this push for strategic use versus the fear of job change or irrelevance, that's a significant hurdle. It's slowing down rollouts in many places.
And then, coupled with that employee friction, there's the problem of actually defining success itself. You called it the ROI benchmarking gaps. We know, 72% of companies are tracking AI performance now?
Right.
But if they don't know what winning actually looks like in their industry, how do they know if they're succeeding? Or just, participating?
That's precisely it. It's the difference between just collecting data points and setting truly competitive targets. For example, maybe your AI gives you a 15% productivity gain on supply chain forecasting. Sounds pretty good in isolation, right?
15% sounds decent.
But what if your closest competitor, using maybe a slightly different approach or scaling it better, achieved a 35% reduction in forecasting errors? Suddenly, your 15% gain means you're actually falling behind competitively.
Ouch, okay.
The lack of standardized cross-industry KPIs for AI performance means a lot of leaders honestly don't know if they're winning the race or just kind of jogging along. They lack that crucial competitive context.
Which unfortunately probably leads us back to just simple human friction, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The need for massive training programs, the sort of inherent resistance to change you get from teams who are comfortable with the old way of doing things.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And let's be frank, maybe some leadership inertia, where senior figures aren't fully bought into the kind of structural change that's really required. These soft elements, they feel like the new bottleneck.
They absolutely are the new bottleneck. And this is crucial because this human friction, this cultural drag, it directly translates into competitive disadvantage. The data suggests, like you said, a modest 10% AI productivity boost might sound acceptable internally.
Until your rival hits 25%.
Exactly. That competitive gap between the aggressive adopters and the, let's say, passive laggards is now defined by that performance difference. And because these AI gains tend to compound over time,
The gap widens faster and faster.
exponentially, potentially. So fixing that internal human friction is now directly tied to retaining market share. It's become a strategic imperative.
So let's look forward then. We've established where we are now, mid-November 2025. Based on this growing confidence in ROI and the recognized maturity of the tech, what does the Wharton study predict for the immediate future? What's likely to happen in 2026?
Well, they're forecasting that 2026 will really be defined as the year of performance at scale. This is the moment we move definitively out of scattered pilot programs and into mandatory, standardized deployment that's driven by formal strategy.
The scoreboard era, as you called it earlier, what are the concrete expectations? What will that actually look like on the ground?
We should expect to see widespread adoption of actual ROI playbooks.
Yeah.
Standardized benchmarks, not just for the IT department, but across every single function, HR, marketing, finance, supply chain.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. Those agentic systems we talked about, they'll likely move out of beta testing and into full production environments, actively executing core tasks. And budgets are reflecting this confidence, too. The study found 88% of firms plan to increase their AI spend next year.
88% are spending more.
Yeah. So the market is going to see AI-driven KPIs, maybe even new ROI comparison tools, actively redefining enterprise strategy and basically determining who wins and who loses in each sector.
That synthesizes it perfectly, I think.
Yeah.
The whole experimental phase of AI, the let's try this cool demo phase, it feels definitively over. We have the data, we have the proven use cases, and now this scoreboard era is beginning, where performance isn't just nice to have, it's basically mandatory for survival. So we will synthesize all these sources, all this data. The real story isn't that initial failure narrative at all. The real story seems to be this remarkably fast transition from, hype and potential to actual hard numbers on the board. The returns are showing up.
They really are.
And the deep irony here, which I kind of love, is that the skeptics, the whole 95% fail rate crowd, they actually accidentally kind of pushed the industry towards this success, didn't they?
They absolutely did. It's a fantastic point. By loudly demanding proof, by asking, where's the beef, they forced executives to stop chasing, empty promises or just cool tech demos.
Right.
They forced them to focus squarely on the measurable outcomes, the dollars and cents, the productivity gains that we're now tracking. They inadvertently imposed a much-needed accountability onto the whole AI industry.
Yeah, worth discipline.
Exactly. So here we stand, mid-November 2025, really on the edge of AI's first proper ROI era. 2026 looks like it'll be all about who can actually deliver those measurable performance improvements consistently at scale.
Okay.
And that leads me to maybe a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to sort of chew on. If the primary source of competitive pressure now is that widening gap we talked about, the difference between getting a 10% boost versus your rival getting a 25% boost.
That widening chasm.
And if we accept that the hardest problems remaining are now cultural things like internal resistance, training lags, leadership inertia, then the key strategic focus has to shift entirely to speed.
Speed adoption.
Speed of change.
And the speed of solving the internal human friction. How quickly can an organization overcome its own internal resistance, its own cultural roadblocks, before that external competitive gap just becomes insurmountably large?
Wow.
It really suggests that the massive future investment needed might not just be in buying more AI technology, but maybe even more so in change management, in cultural adoption strategies, in figuring out the human side of the equation. Something to think about.